Bows and a blessed good morning, brothers and sisters.
And good afternoon.
And yeah,
Okay.
Wonderful. We would like to offer a meditation on gratitude and blessings this morning. And this is a part of a larger mandala of contemplations we want to share. But you'll see why this is a really good place to start. As we begin, we'd like to begin with a beautiful attunement that comes from the Extinction Rebellion. It's their declaration of solemn intent. So as you hear these few lines, really take a moment to feel and notice how these land for you, how they resonate. It begins saying, let's take a moment to remember why we're here. Let's take a moment to remember why we are here. Let's remember our love for this beautiful planet. Let's remember our love for all of humanity in all the corners of the world. As we act today, may we find the courage to bring a deeper sense of love and peace and appreciation to everyone we encounter and every word we speak. We are here for all of us. We are here for all of us. So as you take your seat right now, reach down with your feet or with your hands and touch the holy earth below you. And just sense the depth of roots, you know, though you could go deeper and deeper into the roots of your island, deeper and deeper into the substrate that we share with all things and all beings. And hold the intent that whatever light you generate will shine throughout this whole substrate and offer light to all beings. Whatever peace, whatever goodness, whatever insight, whatever courage you find might shine forth from your being into the deep roots, into the substrate that you share with all things and all beings. And at the same time, just breathe and gather strength from those deep roots, from those connections with everything that is good and true, noble, holy, sacred, alive. Take that to heart and radiate your blessings and your gratitude back to it. And as we move into this meditation on gratitude right now, just experience this as in a sense, generating the fuel we need for this journey. Giving us the strength and the light and the positive energy that we can carry into the challenges and the darkness that we face. And open your heart and mind now with a big ah. And in this open-heartedness and open-mindedness, be mindful of anyone or anything that comes to mind that you're grateful for. And as someone or something or some inner quality of being that you're grateful for comes to mind, gather them into your heart and really feel and savor the experience of gratitude for that person, for that aspect of your life. And see if you can go deep enough into that gratitude that it overflows from your heart with waves of blessings or waves of light that flow back to whoever or whatever you're grateful for. And then welcome whoever comes next, whatever arises next that you're grateful for. And again, draw them into the focus of your awareness. Hold them in your heart, deepen in your experience of gratitude. And allow that gratitude to overflow back as waves of light, waves of blessing, waves of thanksgiving to your eyes, to your friend, to the trees, to anyone or anything that opens your heart to gratitude. And just continue on now, like you're counting beads on a mala or a rosary, one by one or cluster by cluster of anyone or anything, inner or outer, that comes to mind that you're grateful for. And letting the heart reach back with waves of light and blessings to complete the circle. A gift comes to you, you take it to heart, and if you don't say thank you, you break the flow of those blessings. So in this offering of gratitude and thanksgiving, we complete the circle. We complete this holy circle. Be curious and mindful of whoever or whatever presents itself, welcoming them all. Letting your heart reach back with gratitude and blessing.
Nothing is too small or too big. Inside, outside. See what presents itself to you for thanks and blessings.
And moving along now into the next phase of this journey together, as I ring the bell, just with another ah, just return into resting and open awareness, and just feel deeply how this meditation has come alive within you, and what is a glow and a flow within you, having turned your heart and mind to gratitude and thanksgiving. And again, whatever goodness that you find here, bring it to heart like waves of light, and let this flow from your heart through the earth, through the substrate, into the hearts and minds of all beings as a wave of offering, dedication, and blessing. As we'll explore more deeply, our really beloved friend and teacher, Joanna Macy, reminds us, always begin with gratitude. Always begin with gratitude. And we'll explore why we begin with gratitude shortly. So today we'd like to honor requests from our Artmonk beloveds who reached out to us some months ago, and they said, please speak directly to the problems and challenges that people face, in addition to calling forth the light and the positive. Please talk about the darkness and the challenges as well as the positivity and the light. Help us to find ways to learn from the discomforts that arise as a way of growth, rather than turning to peace and light as an escape by spiritual bypassing. Give us a Dharma talk that would explore these themes. So here we go, friends.
Building on yesterday's opening into this topic.
Yeah, and to appreciate that, for us, your requests, just like, the Buddha traveled for 45 years in India, going from village to village, responding to the circumstances, the questions and the needs that were there. So in many ways, your question to us was really the ignition for a profound bundle of contemplations. We'd like to give thanks as we begin this morning for our connections with Joanna Macy, who's really inspired us in this particular bundle of teachings that we'd like to offer. And here's a couple of pictures of us with Joanna. This one's at Spirit Rock at the Dharma Teachers Conference a number of years ago. To us, she's really one of the most iconically relevant teachers of our times. And we'll do the best we can today to share our version of some of the wisdom that we've gleaned from her. Starting with a reminder of this quote that we shared as we opened. Our sorrow is the other face of love, for we only mourn what we deeply care for. The sorrow, grief, and rage we feel is a measure of our humanity and our evolutionary maturity. As our hearts break open, there will be room for the world to heal. And to honor, she quotes this line so often, that the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, that all of us could be more kind, could be more awake, could be more helpful in the world. And there's no shame in our shortcomings, but we need to find ways to dance with that. So the model that we'd like to share is called The Work That Reconnects. And it is articulated in great detail in this beautiful book, Coming Back to Life, with Joanna and Molly Brown. And as it says here at the top, begin with gratitude. And with the strength and the power and the peace that gratitude gives us, then we can move on into the other four phases here. So Michelle is going to just speak to this first part of begin with gratitude.
Yeah, we'll take turns as we walk around, do a walk around this really brilliant framework and model that we've found really helpful, and we've introduced to many groups and organizations that we work with, and it's really been a helpful tool and way of holding, embracing this process of going deeply into the discomfort and the difficulties, and how to process and integrate and emerge in greater wholeness. So gratitude, why gratitude? Why do we begin with gratitude? And you've probably already experienced the benefits of the strengthening and the inspiration and the sense of solidarity, and that we are resourced. It both by inspiration and sources of strength and friendship and care in our life, but by models, by life itself, by nature, whatever it is that comes up for us when we turn our hearts to gratitude gives us the strength and the encouragement to be able to take the deep dive into the discomfort, to know that there are blessings in our lives, no matter how difficult this is. Oh yeah, I know for myself, when I do gratitude meditation, one just keeps sparking the other, and whenever the bell rings, it's like, oh no, not yet, I haven't finished. There's this sense of like, there's so much more than I remember until I really open my heart to examine it. So gratitude is like filling our tanks, expanding our capacity to do the work, the difficult work of being with the challenges. And there's so much research that's coming out on how essential gratitude is for our health and our well-being physically as well, even for our capacity to our performance, our academic excellence. For students in schools actually who keep a gratitude journal get better grades. There's something that tapping into these resources in our lives and not forgetting them, and even to share them with family meals, share a gratitude journal that's shared. There's something that is incredibly strengthening and expanding of our capacity to deal with the difficult aspects of our lives. So it also helps develop calm and a sense of resilience, inner resilience, to meet these challenges that we face. And it dissolves the optical delusion of separation. We talked about that on the first day, Einstein's quote of this prison that we live in of the illusion, the lie of the separate self. As we go into gratitude, we awaken to all those connectivities that support and sustain our existence. So, reminding us of how deeply connected, abundantly resourced we are. Gratitude is based on receiving and reciprocating. There's a flow when we recognize the gifts that we receive. There's a natural, spontaneous wish to, as we reach out to say thank you, to encourage and support those sources. Thank you for the water. We want to take care of that water when we appreciate the gift of having clean water, safe water. That's not a given on this planet. There are many places in the world where that isn't available. So then there's that natural flow to give back that arises. Not being fixed. Gratitude gives us courage and strength, peace and power. Both are the gifts, the results of beginning with thanksgiving. And Joel had mentioned, I think on the first day, the Hopi prophecy of letting go of the shore and pushing out into the river. That takes a lot of courage to jump into that uncertain, fast-flowing turns that we can't even see. But gratitude, remembering that we have sources of support and inspiration and blessing in our life, can give us that courage to let go of the shore and to trust, to jump in, to push out into the river and keep our heads above the water. And to know that we're not alone out there, to see who's in there with us. That's what gratitude gives us, kind of that confidence of that we're not alone on this journey, on this struggle, on this creative, compassionate service. Yeah, so to rejoice in these nourishing and supportive connections, and to acknowledge when we do begin with gratitude, we also are beginning oftentimes to tap into a sense of vulnerability, and sadness may arise, grief may arise even, fear of loss of that which we're grateful for. So gratitude isn't all just light and love, but gratitude opens the heart. It allows the heart to open and to realize that, oh, along with this gratitude, there are also feelings, more difficult feelings that come up, memories of things, of people that we've lost that we're grateful for. So gratitude opens the door to the heart, in all its dimensions. So helps us to embrace the presence of sadness and vulnerability within this abundance of other qualities that, give us this. Within the strength, we can embrace the non-gratitude, so to speak, experiences more wholeheartedly, the losses and the fears. And essentially, gratitude reminds us that no matter how difficult the circumstances may be, we have the sovereignty and the agency of choice. We can remember, we can choose how we respond to both the gifts and the challenges. We can always choose gratitude for whatever is happening. And as Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us, even if we can't, in the depths of our despair, can't remember or think of anything that we feel grateful for, we can remember, we can have gratitude for our non-toothache, for that tooth that's not hurting right now, or our non-backache, or the calamities that haven't or aren't befalling us in this moment. How wonderful, so we can always, as we open our hearts to gratitude, there's always something to give thanks for. Okay.
All right. So going to the second quadrant of Joanna's model, which is really about acknowledging and embracing our sorrow and pain. A couple of things come to mind to build a bridge from yesterday. David Chetlahay Paladin, whose story we told yesterday, used to teach us worrying is just praying backwards. Worrying is just praying backwards. And there's just such wisdom in that. And as we go into this section, I'd like to share Rumi's guest house poem because it's so relevant here. He says this.
And can I just,
yeah,
that this, as we, oh, were you going to show the?
I can, go ahead.
Just show you a picture of the whole circle that we'll be walking through again. And in with the gratitude, we are acknowledging and naming the gifts and the blessings in our life. And then we continue as we move now into honoring and embracing the sufferings of our lives in our world. We're continuing to acknowledge and name, but now we're acknowledging and naming the challenges and the discomforts in our life. And Rumi's guest house poem is a beautiful invitation.
Beautiful. Feel free to take a screenshot of this and we'll also send this to you through the Art Monks. So Rumi's wisdom, he says, this being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome, welcome and entertain them all. Even if they come as a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. She may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, the rage, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Both Michelle and I have clinical backgrounds. I used to run a stress management, a pain clinic for a large HMO. Michelle ran a similar program at Children's Medical Center here in town. One of the practices that I used to suggest that's kind of in the spirit of this, that's really quite powerful, is to set a time every day to do worrying meditation. And at that time, sit down. If any pleasant or happy thoughts come, just say, not now, I'm busy worrying.
Come back later.
And just sit down, have a cup of tea with all of your little demons and shmoos, you know, and just say, bring it on. Just let me hear your voice. Let me name you and see you and just take you to heart and love you to death, you know, and then after 15, 20 minutes or so, just say, well, I'm terribly sorry, but we've run out of time for today. I'll see you tomorrow if you're still relevant. And then when they show up at other times during the day, just to say, I'm terribly sorry, but I'm just busy living my life in the best way I can. And you're early, you know, go away and I'll see you later. I'll see you at 4:30 today, you know, ciao, out of here. So the wisdom traditions teach us that the root of the cause of suffering and sorrow and pain and cruelty and all of this is just a fundamental misperception. We slip out of a unitive, non-dual experience of just being one with everything and everyone, in which state of consciousness we could never harm anything or anyone because they're part of us, you know, and it's just inconceivable to do any harm at that level. But when consciousness gets fragmented, the moment there's a me and a you, we're othering. They're subject and object, we're othering. And we've seen, you know, where that can go and the kind of destruction that can create. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Hebrew word for sin means missing the mark, as in just not getting it, you know, just not comprehending the way things are. And out of that fundamental ignorance, we get attached to things we love and want to hold on to them and get totally freaked out when they change and disappear. And we get really aggressive and fearful and harmful towards things that we don't like. And it just devolves from there into what we see. So in many ways, you know, that my Buddhist training has been so helpful in just looking at this world. And I'll still again and again say, how could they do that? How could people be so greedy, so mean, so stupid? But, you know, from a Buddhist kind of wisdom tradition standpoint, what we see going on in the world makes total sense. This is how unenlightened, deluded, confused beings act. This is how they treat each other. This is what they do to their environment. It's really pretty understandable at that level, maddening though it can be. So, as Michelle said, we've named the gratitudes and called them forth. Through the gratitude meditation, we can begin to develop the inner calm and the resilience and the strength necessary to match the magnitude of the challenges that we find. And if we go straight into step 2 without doing the gratitude, we are likely to just end up in rage or despair or depression. Okay, so it's absolutely important. If you want to rage against the empire, if you want to be productive in your change, to do whatever you can to resource yourself, to get enough sleep, to get enough love, to get enough beauty, enough inspiration, to take refuge in what is good and true and noble and strong, to fill you with so much strength that you can walk through the valley of the shadow of death and not totally freak out.
Not be overwhelmed and drowned in that song.
So Carl Jung described the shadow as the hidden and unconscious aspects of ourselves, both good and bad, which the ego, the sense of separate self, has either repressed or not fully owned and integrated. And the fleeing or avoidance of this shadow can lead to what's sometimes called spiritual bypassing, where we deny, avoid, or remain unaware of or distance ourselves from the shadowy, unresolved, unhealed, frightening, creepy, wounded parts of ourselves. We just don't want to see them. We just don't know what to do with them. And we need to honor that, you know, many of us grew up in and were socialized in families and social groups and schools and institutions where the shadow, denial, suppression, shunning, and distraction was the norm. In these settings, it just wasn't safe for us or healthy for us to acknowledge the pain that was present. There wasn't any tolerance for this, and it simply wasn't wise or safe to call it out and acknowledge what was broken, what hurt, what was dangerous, or to name how we felt or were impacted. And this is so common and so widespread, you know, stiff upper lip, and children are to be seen, not heard, and all that kind of just idiocy. Yet many people unconsciously internalized these systems of oppression, the familial and social systems of oppression. And it's understandable then that the unresolved traumas and dysfunctions that we've experienced then perpetuate themselves living in the shadows of our lives and just erupting out wherever they can. The term spiritual bypassing refers to spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep our emotions, our unfinished business, to shore up a shaky sense of self, to belittle our basic needs, feelings, or developmental potentials.
And that of others.
And that of others. And there's many ways the spiritual bypassing shows up. It could be avoidance of anger. It could be devaluing the feelings of others, or devaluing difficult feelings and just reverting to some spiritual frame for what's going on, even though we're just really a mess inside. It can be emotional numbing or repression, overemphasis of the positive, kind of that Botox smile inner attitude, judgment of others for feeling negative feelings, all those kinds of ways. So, there's more. The more we default to fleeing from these shadowy places, the more these unacknowledged, unloved, and unresolved tendencies fester in the dark, and the more haunted the house becomes. And the more haunted it becomes, the more it terrifies us. And this can just perpetuate itself in a vicious cycle that keeps disintegrating and distancing us from and keeping us afraid of the totality and the wholeness of our fully integrated selves. So the effective way to work with this is to learn to skillfully acknowledge, to be mindful enough to show up and see and name and embrace the difficult emotions and the feelings and the circumstances that disturb us, to sit with them, to be curious about them, to take them to heart, to honor them without repressing or denying these feelings and impulses, these thoughts that frighten us and overwhelm us, and not to give them any power by denying them or ignoring them or rejecting them, or by reifying them. It's I'm depressed, I'm worthless, I'm, by reifying, by identifying with them, not to give them any power.
As if they're like this solid, unchanging, always inherently there, making them more big, even stronger through the reification.
So we need to call these out. We need to honor them. For me, I am just heartbroken at what's going on with the climate chaos and destruction. The prospects of this, just every 7 to 8 minutes, a species goes extinct on this planet. I'm heartbroken by the injustice that I see and the lack of significant change in the structural system that perpetuates that kind of violence and injustice. The list goes on. We've all been, in a sense, we've all got battle fatigue from dealing with COVID, from the assault of the news and all of the injustice and the stupidity and the unknowing, the ignorance, like who to believe, and just on and on and on. So we just like to crack it open here for a short while and just let you give voice to it. Just what are you seeing and how do you feel about that? What just drives you mad or crazy or breaks your heart? Just honor that with your voice here. And we probably won't have a chance to hear everything or from everybody during this time, but let's just get a sample.
Yes.
And we could just bow for yes, we heard you. Okay, what else? Who's next?
I wanted to just say thank you for even bringing that up, because I noticed that there are times that are, good and positive and everything like that. But I'm aware very much that I have this triangle cycle that happens where I can go really, really sad. And I'm like, wow, where'd that come from? Then there's times where I'm like really, really afraid. And it's like, whoa, look at that, really afraid. And then almost like gonna just pop out of my skin rage. And those three aren't all the ones that are there, but I'm thankful for the topic and just identifying it, because I'm aware of my own battle fatigue.
Yeah. And to be really curious about these, to just invite them in for tea can be really helpful, and just say, what are you? Where do you live in my mind and body? Just let me hear your voice. What else?
Police violence against Black and brown bodies.
And how do you feel about that, brother?
I feel complicit. I feel hopeless. I feel a great desire to be of benefit and not sure how.
Thank you. What else?
I feel tremendous grief. I'm on a cleanse right now because I found that I was eating and drinking and just, it was like I had lost control of my own actions. And when I stepped back and watched the behavior, I realized I was really stressed. And this weekend I have just like been flooded with grief, but also gratitude that people like you and all of us exist who are like a counterweight. But I think part of the grief also comes with feeling a weight that if you are paying attention and passionate and, you know, are full of light, that I feel this extra responsibility to share it. And that's a kind of terrifying in a way. Without being centered, it can be really terrifying. But so just a lot of really big emotions going on. So thank you for acknowledging it.
Thank you, Spring. Couple more voices for now.
I feel sad for my my brothers and sisters who work in the VA hospital. A lot of them lost their lives due to COVID-19, and a lot of them were young, and the whole thing was just senseless. And I'm sad, and I'm also angry because the government didn't give the nurses proper protection. A lot of this could be prevented, so I'm really angry about that.
Me too.
I feel terrified for my country. I feel as I'm seeing people clash, particularly over the fact that some people don't think that Black Lives Matter and being malicious. And I'm seeing, Facebook friends say that not close friends, but they're buying guns. I'm really afraid.
Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to say, can you hear me okay?
It's a little breaking up. Maybe turn off your video and just do audio.
Thank you. Is that better?
A little bit,
Yeah,
go ahead.
let's try it.
I just was gonna say, I feel afraid for every child that's being born in America right now. I just feel like I'm gripped with fear. I want their lives better than I'm afraid it's going to end up being. Yeah, I'm just really scared.
Thank you, Lisa. How about one more? And we'll also, after the creative session, hang out if there's just any more to unpack with this. But
At the end of this.
Yeah.
I have trouble with staying compassionate and patient with ignorant, uneducated, or people that choose not to educate themselves around all the things that are going on. I just get, and I try and center myself, and I try and stay in a place of compassion to try and hear their side, but I can't always stay in that place.
Oh, do we know that? There's a really touching story. There was a monk, Tibetan monk, who'd been in a Chinese prison camp for over 20 years, and he escaped, got to Dharamsala, and he was meeting with the Dalai Lama, and he's talking to the Dalai Lama. He said, "Your Holiness, I was so afraid when I was in the camp. I was so afraid," and His Holiness kind of reached out to comfort him, kind of like, "That's natural." He said, "No, I was so afraid that I would lose my compassion for the people who were torturing me." That's deep practice, yeah. So to appreciate, we can do some of this work through the right kinds of meditation. And to do that, we need good teachers, we need a supportive community, and we need some coherent body of teachings to guide us. And it's also really helpful to have therapeutic support, to have coaches and mentors and clinicians that can hold space for us to just fathom the depths of the wounding and the trauma that we carry and just help us sort it out. So there's no shame in looking for that. In the best case scenario, our minds and hearts are open and we're able to empathically resonate with everyone and see what's going on and respond wisely and compassionately. But honestly, you know, part of the problem is that neurologically we're hardwired so that when we encounter fear, anger, isolation, the brain shuts down the part of the brain that allows us to come into empathic resonance with other beings. And then we're likely to other them and separate ourselves from them and have in-group, out-group mentality and microaggressions and heavy aggressions and dominating behavior because of the fear, because of the rage. You know, it makes us stupid in many ways. It shuts down our neurological resources. And that unfortunately, if you look at, you know, and this is part of the thresholds of tolerance we have in the brain. Some people can handle more stress without shutting down. Other people are just really sensitive, and it doesn't take a lot to just shut them down and have them just go into a deeper sense of separation and the behaviors that come from that.
And we can learn to expand that threshold of compassion, that threshold of our capacity through mindfulness, through practices like love and compassion.
Yeah, and that's where, you know, this inner training is so important, to develop capacity to widen our thresholds of tolerance, to develop the neural circuitry that just allows us to sit in the fire and tolerate more heat before we get totally fried by it. So this is just a little glimpse, but, you know, just my hope is that you're curious about and excited to learn more about how you can really embrace the sorrow and the pain, and let that be fuel for your awakening and your growth and your activism and your creative spirit and art making.
And to have more compassion for ourselves and others who are under threat or are feeling threatened or fearful. Have this neurological shutdown happening, to be able to recognize that within ourselves and to appreciate that this happens.
To open our hearts to compassion.
Okay, so just moving, continuing the walk now, just to touch on this, the whole process. Do you want to show it back again? So the third step in this one helpful scaffolding and framework is, having begun with gratitude, having looked deeply and embraced the suffering and called it out and acknowledged it and felt it. Through this process of processing the suffering and not ignoring it, we begin to see with our wisdom eyes, see in a fresh way, to have a capacity to have different perspectives and a wider appreciation, including the sense of greater connectedness, interconnectedness becomes more apparent. And again, you know, with our hearts and minds are capable, having been capable and willing to push out into the river of change and flow, to go beyond the rigidity and trying to hold on to certainty, being willing to go into the unknown, we, in a sense, can connect with greater trust and openness and relaxation and actually confidence that we were able to go into these difficult places and that we have others with us, swimming in this river with us. So again, strengthening. And one of the greatest gifts is that we can begin to see another as just like me, feeling afraid. Just like me, this person wants to go beyond this madness. Just like me, this person wants to feel safe and healthy. And building that network of connection, of what we share in common, and going beyond the separation and the divisiveness. That's this third aspect of being able to see with fresh eyes. Here's where our creativity and the art can really come forward to express the new perspectives, to help us see with new eyes. you know, if any of you have seen the film Amandla about the struggle to dismantle apartheid in South Africa, and what a huge role music and dance and this capacity to hold a different vision in the face of such atrocity and suffering. I really recommend this film if you haven't seen it.
Amandala.
Seeing with fresh eyes, moving with a new way together. And greater empathy. Clearer seeing opens our hearts to greater compassion for all the suffering. A deeper love, wishing well to all beings, and a greater sympathetic joy, the capacity to rejoice in the goodness, as well as greater equanimity, which comes back to what I was just speaking about, you know, diminishing the othering, more equalizing and connected. So on the fourth, now the fourth one is really where we move into action, where we bring our wisdom and our compassion and our seeing and our ability to name and acknowledge and be with the difficult feelings and the discomfort, and to begin to open and allow integration to happen. And then we go forth in compassionate creative service. We go forth with our art making in ways that really serve this transformation of consciousness. And Joanna offers in particular 3 mutually supportive and complementary ways, levels of going forth to bring about change, transformation. And the first is very much what COVID has again, we didn't choose it, but this need to slow down, to shut things down. So the first movement is slowing down the damage, getting in the way of the harm, stopping the destruction of the planet in whatever way we can to slow down the destructive patterns. So all of the forms of activism that call attention and direct actions to get in the way of the pipeline, to get in the way of the tanks, you know, to stop wasting our resources, you know, all the different ways, recycling, everything that we can do to just start to halt or at least slow down the damage. The second is creating, you know, coming through our generative capacity of creative spirits to bring forth new models, new organizations, new systems and structures to show new possibilities, new ways of doing things, you know, that through our actions, through our art making, to show the new, to open up a visionary capacity. And as I go through these, I didn't say this, but as I speak to these 3, the slowing down and the creating new models and possibilities, just pause and see what, you know, how do you envision this? What memories or inspirations, images for the future might arise through these 3, the slowing down the damage, the generating of new forms and possibilities. And the third, and again, these are all these all work together. They're mutually supportive. The third is raising consciousness. As someone said, you know, that taking that capacity to educate ourselves, learning, seeing our blind spots, you know, and sharing that, raising consciousness. And, you know, what are the ways in which you are manifesting these 3, working in all these 3 different, on these 3 different levels, these 3 different means of transformation.
And in a sense, in the spirit of this retreat, how are you moved as an artist to contribute to those 3 endeavors? It could be a really beautiful seed for your contemplations. Okay, we'd like to bust it open here and hear your voices, either reflections to share or questions to ask for us to explore together for about 9 more minutes. Yeah, bring it forth.
We invite you, your reflections, questions.
And as you do, maybe just pause for a moment and just notice how you feel, how this talk has touched you, what's alive within you. and then bring forth whatever reflections or questions may stream out of that.
I would like to ask about something that, in a way, it seems to me very simple, but sometimes I don't know very well how to deal with it. You told that it's good to recognize our emotions and not hide them, but then also not reaffirm them. And sometimes I feel that I don't want to speak so much or express so much certain feelings to people, because sometimes I feel that if I do that, I will reinforce it. And sometimes I don't know very well the limit, because we have to express, but also if we express too much, then we are reaffirming always the things. So.
Great question.
Yeah, and that's where the discernment, where we develop that wisdom to know when, how much, what's appropriate in which situation. But that, you know, it may be with certain people that we are more empowered even by the trust that's there already, or we feel safer to really acknowledge, or even with ourselves, even in our art, that we acknowledge it, but to know when are we starting to reinforce it or feed it, is what I hear you saying. You know, when are we starting to rehearse and strengthen it through, it goes beyond the acknowledgement. At what point? And we each have to really feel into that. There's no like general statement for that, but it's watching the other person's eyes, feeling our own energy growing, you know, within our body, finding that balance between not speaking it, not expressing it at all, which is really harmful, and overindulging it. You know, knowing when it's processing and integrating, and being clear on our intention is also really helpful. You know, why are we speaking it? You know, to what degree is it helpful, and when does it stop being helpful and turn into you know, kind of more self-sabotaging.
And Sarah, even the practice of naming your emotions is a really powerful practice. Sadness is with me, rage is with me, grief is with me. That's been shown to really have a wonderfully helpful health benefit to it, just to be able to name the emotions and to expand your vocabulary to describe the nuances of emotions. Look at the Atlas of Emotions website to really expand the vocabulary.
The nuances.
And it's not just about speaking to other people. We had one teacher who said, when you leave this retreat, be careful not to say that one sentence too much, where people's eyes kind of roll back and you lose them, you know? So it's more about, just for ourselves, knowing what we're feeling, being able to voice that, journal it, art it, dance it, go tell a tree about what we're experiencing. And if we have the blessing of a trusted friend where we have a social contract and agreement to be able to really explore together, then that's just, oh, so precious. But in many of our lives, kind of rare too.
Maybe creating, like today, you know, there's a mandate, let's express it. Let's bring it up with, you know, we've created a safe container already over the past couple of days of our sharing and our work together, that we can allow these stronger feelings to come up and bring mindfulness together to know when is enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Obrigado.
Obrigado.
Sometimes I think that I protect myself too much because it's so painful.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about the coming debate, and you helped me with that, because if I look at watching it as courage, I'm really giving myself some strength right from the get-go. And then that just, because it's so nauseating, the vitriol and lies. And I wasn't sure I could do it, because I really sometimes think I protect myself too much. I guess that's what I really wanted to say, so thanks.
Yeah, thanks for reframing it, because there's really a strength in being able to bear witness, not taking sides, not, you know, criticizing it, but, you know, that being with the courage to bear witness to the pain that you're feeling and that probably a lot of people are feeling, but rather than turning our backs on it to overprotect, as you're saying, you know, it's a kind of courage and compassion to be able to step in, but also check and notice, you know, it's not about torturing yourself either. So when might be enough also, even with how much bearing witness can you healthfully tolerate in that moment. There's no shame to take a break, turn it off for a while, you know, come back if you want to.
You know, I saw what you were talking about, Michelle, when I went to the Holocaust Museum in Israel.
Yeah.
Because I came out with such resolve, you know, and so much knowledge that I hadn't, especially the Children's Museum there. That was amazing. And it resonated through my whole life. And I got strength from it. I'd kind of forgotten that because it was horrible.
And Joan and everyone else, you know, if we can recognize when we're approaching a threshold to enter a museum, to listen to Democracy Now!, to surf the news or watch a debate, that we're entering into a holy space. And we don't want to do it like news porn. We want to show up with agency and really as a spiritual warrior, and let it be a meditation. And I'd really suggest with the debates, rather than watch live, do it with a recording afterwards where you could pause it and maybe just sit for a few moments with something that really triggers you in some kind of way, and look at that. And then maybe go back into it, or maybe we'll just watch the debates as a Sangha meditation, you know, and just be there together and just unpack it.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, but you know, not to be victimized by the media, but to be empowered by it. You know, to let it be a meditation is such a discipline these days, because we get really compulsive about consuming, and then we just become victimized by it.
I guess what you're talking about is put choice into it in our court.
Exactly.
And agency.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Maybe one more. And then we'll roll on. Yeah, Marcy.
You know, I was going to say before Joan spoke, I get out of control. This is what I was going to say. I get totally out of control. I just like lose it with the news. And I was going to say, like, maybe I could be more intentional and choose, you know, what I expose myself to, because I curse like, you know, a sailor, whatever you want to say. I just like lose it. But as you're talking to Joan, I'm saying like, I don't know if I could do it. What you're talking about, I really don't know.
Small bits, you know, we tend to get so overloaded and so outraged, and we either go into shutting down and rigidity, or we go into just flipping out in chaos. And what you want to find is, it's called the river of integration between the banks of rigidity and chaos. And there's an acronym. We want to be flexible, adaptive, coherent, energized, and stable. Faces. Flexible, adaptable, coherent, energized, and stable. We really want to bring a meditative mind into that stuff.
Because only losing it's natural, and it may be what's authentic, but is it helpful for you, or healthful for you, to just allow those mind viruses to, you know, replicate and within you and destroy your peace of mind and your even capacity to think clearly? So there is, and we're addicted to it in many levels. So that's why it's hard. So to experiment with it, explore that, Joyce.
So as we wrap up here, we'll put the guest house poem in the chat. That's a really good reminder, and maybe just do a calligraphy of worrying is just praying backwards and just put it someplace really visible to kind of guide you through this. Let's just take a moment as we wrap this piece just to gather the goodness, the strength, the inspiration, the resolve into our heart and to radiate this as a wave of dedication to continue to light our way and to continue to share this goodness and this light with all beings.
And to remember to forgive ourselves when we forget and when we miss the mark, so that we can come back and be resilient and start again.
Thank you all. We'll stick around after the creative session if anybody just wants to explore and unpack any of this anymore. Bless you all for showing up so wholeheartedly.
Thank you for sharing, being present.
Neva.
Woo! Thank you so much. My heart is pounding. I have today we have only about 15 minutes for this creative starter, but actually it might flow nicely from, at least for me, the intensity of the past hour. So let's take a moment, not a break fully, but just to stand up. If you're like me and have some adrenaline in your body, just give a little physical voice to that, yeah, so that there's a little bit of freshness coming in. Oh. All right, friends, can you hear me with this headset? Okay, wonderful. Okay. Okay, great. So I am so grateful for that whole Dharma session. Thank you both so much. And what I was going to share today doesn't include the work of Joanna Macy, but since we've been studying some of her work in the past hour, I thought I'd bring forth something that feels quite relevant. One of her teachings asks us to look at the incredible gift to be in human form. And one of the reasons to focus on this incredible blessing to arrive in human form is choice. That in a human birth, we have the opportunity to meet karma, to meet consequences as patterns and habits continue to roll through, both at an individual level and at a cultural level, that this is happening, that there's momentum coming through this time-space continuum. And we have the opportunity to choose. We get to be in collaboration with that karmic unfolding. And so this to me is really a precious, precious teaching, as it feels like the forward momentum of pain is too great to remember that when we can be awake to the fact that we're awake, we can choose. Even at a small scale, but we can choose. So today what I'd like to offer for our creative inspiration is on the offer pedal. And so we've been focusing a lot this weekend on this kind of more inner work, connecting inner to outer, but of welcoming, attuning. That's kind of like seeing what comes. And then we've kind of made our way slightly into editing and then into offering. And to me, the editing process is where we start to get this beautiful dialogue of things coming kind of from a different space in the conscious brain, and then the conscious brain interacting with it and saying, okay, what's appropriate to share right now? What's called for right now in my work? And maybe not everything. And then in the offer petal, we get yet another kind of dialogue, which is not just what's called for in my own life, but how does my art create culture? So we're all a part of a constantly evolving and manifesting thing that we call culture, that is humans and human creations as we interact with the totality of our environment. And so there's this balance, I think, in art of how to authentically share what arises for you and have some trust that it will land, that we're a part of each other's lives in this interconnected web, and also the responsibility of impact. I'm sure we've all experienced moments where either our art or our actions have an impact that wasn't what we intended. And so in this offer petal, it's a brave place, because how can we have the courage to offer and be willing to take responsibility to welcome what comes of that offering? And sometimes to offer from a place of creating intentional change, to sometimes choose to make art for culture creation, for change. So I'd like to share this. It's called the Amoeba model of cultural change. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't. Get ready. Oh no, that's not what I want. Hold on. Can one of you close that? Just shut it down. Okay, can you all see this? Yeah, okay, cool. So I have found this to be really grounding, because sometimes it can feel this kind of overwhelm of like, I'm in this system and the systems have power, and I as an individual have no ability to operate on a scale that's worthwhile. And so this kind of gives an outline of how change can happen within a system. And so I have found inspiration in this both in my kind of personal body system as an individual, in a small community system, like within the Art Monastery, within a community as in like a town or a city, and then thinking at even a larger scale than that. So we don't quite have the time to go super in depth, so I would just like to highlight what I think could be useful for our arts practice today. And then if you prefer to read on, I can share the website and you can go a little further into it. So in the Amoeba, this is like our culture, our society. And I think one thing that's really interesting is it's bound. Yeah, so it's like if you're trying to draw ideas from inside the society, you only have what's inside it. So when I look at this and all the space on the outside, turns out this is also possibility. But in order to be kind of awake to that possibility, I think this is a key place where artists can come in, right? We can channel these kind of new ideas that live in the Imaginarium for creation that could actually show up in the physical world. Maybe not in our lifetimes, but maybe, sometimes change can happen quickly and sometimes not. So in this, we have this innovation up here in the right corner. This is an idea that is currently not present inside the Amoeba, inside the culture. So this innovation, who knows where it comes from? Might come from you, might be living inside your heart space right now, might be in that shadow space of pain, maybe. And then way out at the edge here, we have the innovators. And that's someone who has this idea, this concept, or this feeling that could make its way into the amoeba. But usually what happens, usually innovators are really, truly wild spirits. You know, they're like living on the edge, in touch with a different kind of, realm than maybe the normal mind state of the mainstream culture. So the innovator is not usually the type of person who's going to be able to actually get that idea into the mainstream culture. So, bless these people, we need them so much. But then the next person in is the change agent. You can see here on the structure, it says CA, change agent. So the change agent is someone who can both kind of tap into that innovator, either to that physical person or like has a connection to that sort of like way new idea, but also like has a hand in reality, like is like, okay, I'm connected also into like how to talk to people and how to use language that's not offensive or that doesn't blow people open or shut them down, but has like some little bit of skill to turn this newness into something that's somehow palatable or somehow can touch another human. So change agents are really, really key for letting this idea come in. Then the next person in is a transformer. That's that little T here. And transformers tend to be people that have some amount of reach, or you could say social status or community. These are people that the mainstream is represented by all these little M's, mainstreamers. Mainstreamers trust transformers. We maybe don't all trust the same transformers, but it's like, this might be a journalist. This could also be an artist. This could be a public speaker. This could be a CEO. This is someone who has some sort of broader reach. And for whatever reason, many people have a certain level of trust that when this person says something, I'm gonna actually consider it. Even if it's a bit outside of my normal realm, I'm gonna consider it. So the mainstreamers look to the transformers, and then the mainstreamers, you can see they surround this little squiggly box, the controllers, and you could think of that as people who make policy. So in our broader human system, or you could think of them as government. Sometimes I think of them also as capitalism, people who are like feeding us major messaging and or making policies that have an impact on our culture. And there, I think a lot of times things don't happen to the controllers until it's more or less accepted by the mainstream. So the things that we want to change, maybe in government, in policy, sometimes radical change comes out of the center, but more often that change is going to come from this outside innovation trickling in, and then enough of the mainstream has that vibe that then the policymakers are like, okay, all right, that change is happening. So there's this kind of evolution of change. And so when we're thinking about our artwork and offering it forward, I think it's quite helpful sometimes to place yourself in a system of change into who your audience is. When we apply for a lot of grants, and grants always ask this really annoying question, like, who's your audience for this piece? And a lot of times I have this feeling of like, look, I don't know, man, I'm making art like from my heart and I don't know who it's for. And sometimes I think that's true. It's just like this wild creativity is coming through and it's going to find its own place in the world. And on the other hand, I think there can be some potency of like, maybe this piece has come through, but who is it for, right? The innovator is not gonna be so effective in sharing that idea directly with mainstream. They're maybe not ready for that. And so there's this kind of, whether, and for probably different issues, we see ourselves in different places. We're not all responsible for every single thing. It's kind of this unfolding together. But I just want to offer this as a tool of like how we impact each other and how change actually happens. and how culture creation is possible through art. So I want to wrap up soon so you all have time to make some art this afternoon, but maybe I'll just loosely throw in some of these other people over here, the curmudgeons, the laggards, the reactionaries, the iconoclasts, the spiritual recluses. So these are people who maybe you don't need to, like if someone, the laggards are people who are going to hang on to the status quo, like until everyone else is gone, and then they're going to go. They don't want to be left behind, but they're going to be the very last. So as a change agent, you don't maybe need to work with them so soon. You know, just let them, they're not your target audience for creating change. Or reactionaries who are having these kind of like sudden reactions to things that they could kind of hinder your ability if you don't have the resilience that Joel and Michelle were talking about. It's like they might like shoot you down right away. And so maybe that person isn't your person. So, but to not be disheartened by that, you know, to find the people who are open to this new idea, and then work there with your ideas, work there with your passion, and let it have a chance to bloom. And I this little spiritual recluses, it's like, you know, we run the Art Monastery, so we're constantly trying to not be these people, or, you know, tap into that to get the wellspring back of resilience, and then to fully go back into the culture, you know, to fully participate in the pain of the world and bring our bodhisattva nature forward. Okay. Well, may your art making be so inspired this afternoon. May we collectively and individually be a force of great love in the world. So I think that we'll go ahead and wrap this session for folks who are ready to head off into their afternoon, and we can hang out, like the Leveys said, for a few moments with people who could either use a little extra support or have some questions. This afternoon you have 2 hours and 15 minutes, so it's a shorter afternoon session than we've had in the past. And then we'll come back together for our normal hour-long art share. If you have art you'd like to share, it's helpful if you can email us in advance. And then we'll have a closing ceremony, and then our final singing session. So we will see you soon. May you be so blessed on your journey this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Eva, I have a question. Who are the iconoclasts? Are they the like early adopters, or who are they?
I think this is really interesting. Some people who work with this model talk about the iconoclast actually as activists.
Oh.
They use that term interchangeably as someone who's willing to like shout from the edge what they see and what's wrong, but they're not actually kind of getting inside to like have the actual conversations. So it's an interesting, I'm not crazy about that because I have a kind of a positive feeling towards activism and the word activist. But in this model, I think it's trying to encourage working together to create this change rather than an oppositional view, or at least that's what I've been able to gain from kind of reading about it and working with it. Yeah.
That's interesting because the iconoclast seems to emphasize the breaking down, the tearing down of the old icons, the old, you know, the old gods, the old what we've clung to. So it's more it's more like the revolutionary in the destructive phase or the taking down phase, but it doesn't have the generative and creative tone to it in the iconoclast. So I think the activist has potentially can have both. So there is a place for both tearing down and the building, rebuilding in a different way.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Can I also add just one more thing? When I learned about the Amoeba theory of change, one of the things they said was that the transformers are somewhere between 10 and 20% of the population. And if you can convert the transformers, then it spreads out to the mainstreamers. So actually, I found that so heartening. Like, oh, okay, it's not that we need to convince 80 or 90% of the people to in order to really make significant changes. We only need to target the transformers. And it feels like a much more achievable number of people.
Wow.
Electricity going through the transformers.
Yeah. So let's continue to explore together reflections back, reverberations from the beautiful, inspiring talk that Neva just offered, or any of the things that we brought forward. Is there anything else that just wants to be given voice to or called forth or questioned? Let's explore a little bit if there's interest.
If there is.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something about discernment, about that whole issue of being with what's hard to be with, and the discernment about it, about when are you kind of wallowing in it, and when is it time to be with it. And in my experience, when something's really hard to be with, if there's enough resource and I can bring presence, real presence to it, and sometimes I'm going to need the accompaniment of another person to give me more resource. But when I can bring presence to what's really hard to be with, it naturally shifts on its own.
Yeah.
There's a process that happens. And I think for me anyway, when it feels like I'm stuck in something that's a really hard feeling, that probably means two things. It probably means that I don't have enough resource to really be with it with presence. Somehow I'm not bringing that presence to it. So it's like a pretend being with it rather than an actual being with it.
That's really good. That makes me think of how part of that resource is the practice we did yesterday and the focus on refuge that we gave, where we reach out and connect with and bring in and invoke actual or spiritual resources to support us in that work. So in going into the dark or the difficult feelings, the scary feelings, then things that we haven't looked at, to call in our allies and our refuges, be they actual friends or be they on inward level, or sources of inspiration and strength that we can draw on.
It can also be helpful, just as you're kind of like opening the space for that kind of deep reflection, just light a candle, bring some light into the darkness. Let the act of lighting the candle kind of ritualize.
Or a flashlight.
Yeah, or just touch your heart and light yourself up, and then call in the allies. Really, you never do this work alone. If you understand contemplative work properly, meditation is really the practice of deep relationship. So as you begin, call in the allies, take refuge in the mandala and the matrix and the networks of blessed friends and mentors and everyone and everything that gives you strength
and support.
And just call in their light and just feel held in that. And then bring that light into the darkness, bring that light into the unknown, the uncertainty, the frightening, whatever it may be. And just bring your love with you, your curiosity with you. Curiosity is such a powerful piece here. I think curiosity, love, and discernment are three, powerful forces to carry into this work. Love your smile, Lisa. Any other reflections or questions? Otherwise, we'll go do art. More art.
I want to say something or ask. I feel like I've been sort of an outlier actively in terms of activism during this time, although that's not true because I'm voting with my money. But can you speak a little bit into the fear? Like, you know, I have a lot of terror actually of if what happens in November, you know, so much so that I think about exit strategies. And I don't mean like, you know, taking my life, but like exiting the country. So, you know, I'm reminded, I don't know why this came up this morning. I was thinking of what was done during the Vietnam War to bring attention to what was really going on in Vietnam by the Buddhists immolating themselves. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I would like to find a way to confront or to deal with this fear in a healthy way where, and maybe this is all, you know, I'm going to shut up and I'll go, well, this is what we're learning how to do here. But sometimes it's immobilizing to a place where I do want to put, you know, I want to do this and stick my fingers in my ears, but it's pretty hard to do that right now because the energy is so alive in the country. I mean, I feel it. I don't have to watch, I don't watch the news, but I feel what's going on and I feel it inside of me. So I don't know if that makes any sense, if you have any thoughts on that, but I'd love to hear that.
Before we respond, just raise your hand if you can really relate to what Susie shared, yeah? You are not alone, you know, these are terrifying times. And so much that is good and that we treasure is being threatened. So I think if we're not experiencing some fear trepidation, we're not paying attention. And with that fear comes kind of an anticipatory grief and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of other things that are part of the fear mandala. So, you know, just to call it out and name it. I think in these times, you know, this is going to be, I think, for many of us, really one of the most challenging and potentially spiritually evolutionary periods of our life, these months to come.
With all the crises colliding, and Vietnam was bad enough, we were focused on that one crisis. We've got so many, you know, coming together, just completely feeding each other, and so it's pretty unprecedented in our human evolution to have to deal with so many existential threats at the same time. So we're really being called to come together, gather ourselves, strengthen, because we have to grow a whole new nervous system to be able to deal with, you know, to actually not just pull away and exit, you know, if we really want to work with the immensity and of this intensity. So it's very, you know, natural that you're feeling what you're feeling.
So I think at a time like this, you know, really, really seek out and find the people and the communities that you can mutually be held by, where you can just talk openly and share and pray or make art or cry together, but not just totally get into a neurotic feeding frenzy, you know, of just feeding each other's fears, but hold that in an ennobling way. Michelle and I are having meditations 4 times a week, and we'll follow up with some links to get on our email list, or you can put your email in the chat here and we'll add you to our list. And that's been a really thriving community, and there's a lot of people who showed up this weekend
with the COVID crisis
that are part of that. Raise your hand if you've been a part of that, you know, so some familiar people. John, you can wave your hand too, so. Yeah.
Peggy.
Yeah.
Ati,
so there'll be some. It's been a really, you know, sweet kind of love bubble to just kind of sit in the fire
Strengthen
together.
ourselves, yeah.
So that's a resource, but find those, and find the practices and the streams of media or the holy books or the places in nature that really, keep filling and renewing your tanks, because we're going to need all the strength we can get going into this time. And Joanna Macy, in this beautiful, moving interview with Jem Bendell, who developed the deep adaptation work, which is something that has really rocked our boats. We've been very deep into this work around the climate crisis. Jem was interviewing Joanna, and Joanna, towards the end of the interview, said, look, Jem, in other dimensions, beings are lining up to take birth on planet Earth right now. At this time, this is such a time of evolutionary and spiritual potential, This crisis time is just like ripping things open in terms of the potential for us to awaken spiritually and socially and creatively together. And like it says in the Hopi prophecy, this could be a good time, even though it's just dangerous and the outcomes are uncertain and it may not be pretty. We can still be sources of incredible light and goodness and kindness and blessings and inspiration in the world. And we are privileged at that level to be alive right now.
To do our best together.
But we can't do it alone, and we can't do it if we're not resourced. And honestly, marinating in fear and rage
for too long
is, visitations, yes, but marinating in it, just is not going to serve us or anybody else. So we need ways to just find our way out of the pit.
Let that be a fuel to motivate our creativity and our service, our compassion and action. But yeah, it's interesting because like even in nature, many like plants can be either medicines or poisons, depending on dosage, depending on what they're mixed with and everything. It's the same for our inner elements. It can strengthen and it can choke us, or the strong emotions, the destructive emotions, sometimes they're called.
And that's where our mindfulness is so important, to just keep self-monitoring, to know when it's time to eat, time to drink, time to pee, time to dance, time to rest, time to go hug a tree and get outside, in the holy book of nature. So we really need to listen for our guidance and honor that.
And it really feels like the muse work that we've been doing the last couple of days, and yesterday especially, is a way of connecting with our guidance, connecting with the spirit of guidance, connecting with that resource that's really important to, again, our human community and all the forces that can support us, including our muse is a very important one to develop this relationship with. There's wisdom being spoken. And to educate, as we educate ourselves, to educate each other. I mean, the whole time that we're in with social media, that no one's ever, didn't have to deal with that in the Vietnam War. Yes, lies were being told and numbers were being, fabricated about deaths and everything that we were fed. And that was part of my awakening as a young teenager, during that time. And it's like, what? The government isn't telling us the truth? Like, wow, the scales falling over my eyes. Hello, welcome to, waking up and growing up. But we weren't bombarded by the replication and the intensification of that disinformation and those lies. It came through, one bunch at a time. So to be aware, I think we were reading about lies being, you have the deep.
Yeah, emotionally charged lies, especially if there's a sense of outrage to them, travel 6 times faster than the bland truth.
They get
through
repeated
social networks.
6 times faster.
You can actually search for that, get the research. It's fascinating.
So, to be, have the awareness of what we're working with and not to underestimate. That's why we really to pool our wisdom and our awareness and our resources and our love this time more than ever. So it can be a point of growth, of incredible growth and spiritual awakening.
All
Other
right,
voices, thank you.
I just sometimes wonder what would have happened if Jim Jones had had social media.
That's a story that doesn't need to happen. Yeah.
One thing, just from, oh.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sure, just from what you were just saying about times for growth, one of the things that I'm experiencing right now is myself in a sense of history. And I'm finding myself much more able to empathize with people in other countries, people throughout history going through moments different from, but like this one. And that's both terrifying and comforting.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much for that, Joanna. Well, shall we dance on into the afternoon, nourish ourselves?